Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Voice Notes from Samio. Today's topic is perfectionism. I'm sure you already know, if you are struggling, how much it can hold you back. So today I'm going to reflect on some of the ways it's holding you back and the ways it's been holding me back. And I'm going to share some of my tips of how I've been overcoming it because I've been calling myself a recovering perfectionist. In fact, I'm going to put this badge on, which I made for myself. If you're listening and not watching, the badge is pretty much just a pink piece of card that says recovering perfectionist. Did I make it myself? Maybe. I think in our current society, perfectionism is thrown around a lot. For a while, I think it was almost seen as a good thing, like, oh, I'm such a perfectionist, as if to say we have high standards. But in reality, I think it often just pertains to being a chronic overthinker, which results in a lot of anxiety and stress, and it ain't that great. So a few weeks back, I had a pretty eye-opening therapy session, so much so that it has led me to take a lot more action and just kind of beat this beast. And one of the most profound things that I think I've done so far in therapy, and my therapist is amazing, by the way, and it makes me laugh how simple this is. They got me to make a pros and cons list. Okay, a pros and cons list of the advantages and disadvantages that being a perfectionist were having on my life. And now this was so profound that this has kicked me up the bum. I keep it by my desk. This is my little moleskin notebook that I keep by my desk. And it has this pros and cons list. And I'm going to share it with you today because you might be able to relate to some of the things. And also, I'm going to share like how I have been overcoming these things. Number one, it takes up too much time. I have spent hours, if not days. You know what? I will go as far as to say years of my life wasted on trying to perfect things. And actually, you could just be getting started and trying and failing and learning and growing. That's what I'm now realizing. I mean, it's not like we haven't heard these things before. I'm sure you have, I have before, but it just took something in me to click. And I think for me, having this written out to see how much of a disadvantage it was and to see that the advantages, which I will go over in a bit, by the way, the advantages were so lacking in comparison that I was like, is it actually worth me being robbed of all this time when actually I could just be taking action, imperfect action, and moving forward? Because at the end of the day, even if you try and perfect, it's never going to be perfect anyway, is it? It's never going to feel good enough. It's never going to actually be, this magical word, perfect. So, we may as well move forward. And that's what I'm realizing. So my solution to this is quite literally to remind myself progress over perfection. And I have been hammering this into myself every single day because what I have realized, and it's something that I've known for a while, but I'm really just taking stock of it more now. The people that actually progress in their goals, careers, anything that they want to pursue, they just keep going. They keep showing up. They keep progressing and they're not necessarily trying to make everything perfect. But what's magical about this is that usually things that, that we perceive as perfect as like an outsider, really, it's just happened from them just taking action and regularly showing up. So that's a big one for me because, life is short. Like, why do we need to waste time overthinking things? So progress over perfection. Number two, there's a never ending to-do list. For me, the to-do lists, honestly, I have been lessening, let's say, the to-do list. And a big thing with this, again, it kind of goes back to the not wasting time. And I'm prioritizing what's actually important rather than thinking that every area of my life or everything has to be done all at once because it's not feasible. And actually, when I have this massive to-do list, I overwhelm myself so much, or I start a bit here and I'll start a bit there and nothing ever gets fully done. Then I beat myself up because it's not perfect. And then the cycle continues. But actually just focusing on less, a few tasks each day that are the highest priority and getting those done, I have found that just the biggest shift. And it's just enabled me to move forward and keep taking action and not be so overwhelmed every day with that to-do list and just letting go of some of those really high standards that not every area of your life is going to be peak 10 out of 10 all the time. And it's actually just taking those little actions and little steps, bite-sized chunks each day that aren't going to like absolutely overwhelm us, that will actually make the biggest progress over time in all areas. Number 3, it stops you from being authentic. This is a huge one for me. I have grappled with this so hard because I'm someone who I like to show up as my authentic self. I like myself, I like my personality, but I do really find it hard sometimes, particularly me with my work, how I show up creatively, because I overthink everything too much. And the way it has held me back has driven me mad. I mean, this is literally part of the reason I even felt inspired to do this, to just have these very candid, relaxed chats, because I'm a bit of an artist. I like to create. I like to see myself. Well, I am a creative. That's what I do. I'm a creative person, and I think I step into that identity so much that sometimes I am trying to be this most perfect artist, creative person, that it actually blocks me from just like showing up as the messy, chaotic person I am. Because believe me, I can be chaotic AF, but like in a fun way, not in like a messy way. Although I am messy, but you know what I mean. So basically, I just want to share more of my authenticity, my real personality, because I think when I'm getting so caught up on the creative, which is obviously stuff that I love, like my storytelling. If you follow me on social media, I love my like short form, like videos and stuff like that, but they're all heavily scripted. And it has kind of stopped me from just showing up and just like now just talking to camera, because I like to chat. And I feel like having these rules in place for ourselves of like how we have to show up can really block off parts of ourselves. Maybe someone who needs to hear my voice in this way, someone else may not. You might have already switched off already because you're like, this girl likes to chat. But for someone else, they can be like, you know what, I relate to this and I need to hear this message in this way. So whatever it is for you, I think allowing yourself to show up authentically is really going to kick perfectionism in the butt. Because I think a big part of it actually can also come back to like a fear of rejection. We all want to be liked, right? We all want to be accepted, but sometimes it can come at a little bit of a detriment to yourself if you're blocking parts of yourself off, because you're never going to please everyone at the end of the day. Not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to want to see your work or care about what you have to say, but the right people will. So stepping into that authenticity, that is what we are going for in 2025. Also, I wanted to add on the authenticity part, it can really take you away from yourself, because obviously a big part of perfectionism is wanting to be accepted, wanting to be well received. And that can really lean itself into people pleasing and take away a lot of your own judgments and ideas, because you kind of can end up looking externally for the answers. And so I think that's a big piece of where it strips you of your authenticity, not necessarily just in that you're not showing up as yourself, because I think it's the part where we start looking externally for how to be and how to show up. And it kind of takes us further away from our own ideas, our own standpoints and things, and just on how we authentically want to be and present ourselves in the world. So you might actually feel like you are showing up authentically in some areas, but in others, like you're not, or you're feeling a little bit stifled and like you're not fully trusting yourself. And so it creates this sort of dissonance where something is not quite harmonious and it doesn't seem to quite mesh. And so that's when it's important to really reflect on your own values and your own boundaries and really get back to the core of what's important to you. So then you can start showing up in ways that align with those values, irrespective of other people's opinions or thoughts on the matter. And that will allow you to really step into that authenticity. And it is scary at first, because obviously if you've been people pleasing and you've been trying to do this whole perfectionist thing for a long time and show up in a way that is deemed as acceptable or deemed as good, it is going to feel a little bit scary. It's going to feel a bit like, oh, am I allowed to do this? But the more that you practice and the more that you show up in that way, it's going to build that self-trust and that self-inner knowing that that is authentically you and that it's okay to be that way. Number 4, it makes you feel bad about yourself. And I think this kind of touches on all the previous points. When you can't keep up with the to-do list, you feel like you failed. When you spent too much time on something, you feel frustrated. When you don't feel like you're able to show up as your authentic self, you feel blocked, whether it's creatively or whatever it is. And it really keeps us in that self-critical mindset. And actually, it's completely the opposite of how we want to feel. Like, I would say that most of us do what we do because we want to feel good. We pursue what we do because we want to feel good. And so if we're kind of berating ourselves to do these things to these standards, we're kind of, it's like the opposite, isn't it, of what we're trying to achieve. It's like constantly telling ourselves we're not good enough, so be better so we can feel good. Doesn't really make sense. So dropping some of these ridiculously high expectations we have on ourselves, these standards that a lot of the time, let's be real, they're not achievable, or they might be for a short period, but we quickly become burnt out. In fact, like just lowering some of this and just, loosening up a little bit will allow us to just give ourselves a bit more self-love, a little bit more compassion. And one thing I always, always go back to is thinking about how I would treat a friend. And if a friend came to me and they shared a piece of artwork or, I don't know, a project, like, don't get me wrong, I think it's good to be honest. And if someone asks for genuine critique, give that. But you're not going to berate them for it. Like, if someone's put their heart and soul into something and they've, created a piece of art or they've written something or they've started a business, there's a way to give compassionate feedback. And I think often we don't do that to ourselves. We can just straight away tear it to pieces or see the bits that need to be better. Whereas I feel like for other people, or at least for me anyway, I find it so much easier to be like, wow, that's amazing, like, well done. So we need to like bring that back. We need to give that a little bit more of that to ourselves. So overcoming that with being more compassionate and remembering how you treat a friend. Number 5, it holds you back from putting stuff out there. Oh my gosh, this one. I don't know why this was not number 1 on my list when I was doing this in my therapy session, because the amount of things, creative ideas, projects, all sorts of things that I have not put out there because perfectionism, this little voice has been like, oh, I don't think that's good enough. I could do a whole episode on this particular point. I probably will at some point. I got a lot to say. If you stop yourself from putting things out there because you don't think they're perfect, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're robbing yourself from the ability to learn and grow. It kind of goes back to an earlier point I made, but actually the growth you can have from just consistently putting stuff out there and moving forward is exponentially, and believe me, because I know it's exponentially bigger than it will be if you're trying to perfect this one thing and then put it out. I mean, there's so many examples of it in business. I should have wrote some notes before this to really hone in on this point, but we're going with it. We're not being perfectionists today. But the amount of people in business that you hear say that they failed more times and then they succeeded, and then they eventually succeeded because they'd failed so many times. And I even know from my own examples, like the times when I've just gone for it and I've kept showing up, they have actually allowed me to grow, have got me to where I want to be quicker. And actually the times when I've tried to perfect things, they've held me back. And sometimes they've kept me so stagnant that I haven't moved at all. And so we really are doing ourselves a disservice. It's like now with this is not the first time I've thought about this. Toyed with the idea of sharing more of this kind of long form chit chat. And then a voice will be like, oh no, not that. Or I've had chats like this before on my YouTube and then not done any more. And it's so sad really, because I think of all the amazing ideas, art, businesses, what else? Just stuff that we have missed out on because people have thought it's not good enough to put out there, and someone else will think it's great. So I'll give you an example. I know someone who is an amazing artist. They create just amazing art, everything from sculptures to paintings, And every time I see this person's artwork, I'm like, whoa, why is this not out into the world? And don't get me wrong, I don't think everything we create, if you're an artist or whatever, I don't think everything you create has to be consumed. But at the same time, I know this person would happily make money off their art, and so they should, because I'm a big believer in that. But they just, I don't know, there's just something holding them back. Obviously, I can't force them to put it out into the world, but for me, it's amazing. And obviously for them, there's something there's some perfectionism there that's holding it back. And that's just like one example of my life. I've seen other people. I've got amazing, talented friends, family, people in my life. I've seen people write stuff that's been amazing. And I'm like, why is that not out there? I've seen people do all sorts of things. And I myself am guilty of it. I'm not like above this. I've been there. And this is me, overcoming this right now. But the way it holds you back is sickening. And you don't know who you could entertain, uplift, inspire, help with the things, the ideas that you have and the things that you want to put out there. You just kind of need to go for it. A way that I am overcoming that is I'm just going with the thing. Like, this is an idea I wanted to do. I'm not overthinking it. I'm not perfecting it. This is not my usual glossy edited style of video, which I love, and I will still do those. But for me, they do kind of keep me a little bit stuck because I can't produce that style of content to the level, not to the level, that would be perfectionism, to the quantity I would like. And those ideas shouldn't have to be restrained to a particular format, because that, ladies and gentlemen, is perfectionism. And this leads on perfectly into the next one. I've lost count. Is this number 6? I think so. It leads to feelings of frustration as you're not doing the things you could be doing, and it will eat away at you. And especially when you see one day someone do the thing that you've been saying for the longest time or thinking for the longest time that you want to do. So it's just keeping you blocked. And again, it just goes back to you've just got to take that messy action. It is hard. It is uncomfortable. You have to get uncomfortable to make the progress. I think sometimes we can get a little bit too content with being comfortable, and it's not necessarily happy. It's just like this sort of safe feeling because we know what to expect. And there is a great deal of letting go of control when you're showing up messily and you're not trying to perfect everything. At the end of the day, you have no control either way. You don't have control even if you try and make everything perfect. And you also don't have control when you just kind of show up and find out. So you may as well just loosen up with the stress, to be honest, and just learn as you go kind of thing. But the frustration you feel when you're not doing the thing that you could be doing, whether it's with working out or doing something creatively, honestly, you just need to show up messily, and then you'll learn as you grow and you'll progress. And one day you'll turn around and be like, oh wow, like I'm doing the thing. And in that comes so much satisfaction. Number 7 is it drains energy. And all of this drains energy because if you think this is long, this chit chat I'm having now, imagine having this with yourself all the time. In fact, I know you don't need to imagine because I'm sure if you're listening to it and you've got this far, these are the conversations you have in your head every day. But I think when we put it into perspective and we think, wow, I'm wasting my time, I'm not showing up, I'm watching other people do the thing I should be doing, I'm making all these to-do lists and barely ticking anything off. It's like the energy sap is unreal. If the energy's not good, then many things fall off. And the absolute sap of energy that perfectionism can have on all areas of your life is ridiculous. It's draining. And so we need to reclaim some of that energy back by just lowering some of those expectations and that pressure we put on ourselves, because it is not worth it. The amount of stress you're giving yourself, and for some of you probably chronic stress because you think stuff has to be so good. I have been there, and this is stuff I will talk about in the future, how stress, the impact that has on your health. And once your health goes, that's just so hard to come back from, and nothing else really matters then other than getting that back. So yeah, the energy, draining your energy is just not worth it. And that's all I'm going to say on that one, because it ties quite perfectly onto the next one, which is it robs you of your peace. And just like I said with the energy and the health thing, your peace has got to be high priority. And I'm not talking about sitting there meditating. If you want to do that, cool. I just mean that feeling of like being calm and relaxed and okay. And obviously, we're all going to face stressful situations. Again, we can't control that. But adding heightened stress to yourself because you're worrying about everything being at this certain standard is just not worth it. A perfect example of this is for me, for the longest time, I had all these ideas, all these things that I wanted to do, and I'd think about them, and then I wouldn't take action, and then I'd feel bad about myself, and then I would literally lie in bed at night, night after night, overthinking all the things I didn't do or how I could do things better, and literally just drive myself crazy with it. And I'd go through periods of this, and it was causing me so much stress, which is just not worth it. But that frustration and that feeling of keeping yourself stuck is all because you're putting such a high standard on everything and on yourself and the way that you have to show up. But you need to realize that your ideas are good enough as they are, you're good enough as you are. And in showing up authentically and consistently, over time, you're going to prove to yourself that it's fine, that it's safe, that you can just take inspired action without it having to be so overthought and so perfect. I feel like I've said the word perfect so many times, but there is beauty in imperfection. We want to see some of that rawness. We want to see some of that realness. And it doesn't mean that you can't create something that's beautiful and shiny and glossy, or, you know, do something that's fantastic. But I think the process to get there doesn't have to look like you think it has to look. And I realize a lot of my reflections has to do with art and being a creative, but you can apply these things to any area of your life. I'm just reflecting on areas of my life where I'm a perfectionist. And for me, it's definitely a lot of like the creative side of things, but for you, it might be a different area, because I know this can seep into all areas of your life. The next one is it makes you very self-critical and then you feel shame. This is obviously a very personal one, but I think a lot of us can feel shame, or we're at least trying to avoid shame when we're trying to show up with this level of perfectionism, whether it's in our work or in our personal lives or whatever it may be. But actually, it ties back to that showing up authentically and realizing that our authentic selves are okay and more than enough. And the more we do that, we can prove to ourselves that it's actually okay, and we can strip away some of that shame. I mean, that's quite a big one, especially around the topic of shame. So maybe we can tap into that in a future episode. But in a nutshell, just allowing ourselves to take that messy action and show up imperfectly, and realizing that, you know, we're not necessarily rejected from it. The world doesn't end. Our careers don't end. You know, all the bad things that we worry that might happen, when we realize they don't happen, we can feel a lot safer, and shift through some of that shame. But another thing I do think that really helps with that, and especially with the shame thing, is really thinking of yourself as your child self. I like to reflect and connect a lot with younger me, and it really kind of puts me in touch with that child part of myself that maybe feels a little bit vulnerable, maybe feels that they need to show up a certain way, and just wants to feel safe and accepted. And I think when you view yourself as this child version of you, it gives yourself a lot more compassion. It makes you not want to be so self-critical. I think there was a trend it was either on TikTok or Instagram or something, where people were putting up a picture of their partner and saying, how can I, oh, that's it, a current picture of their partner, and then saying, how can I be mean to them when I'm actually speaking to this person? And then they'd show a child version of their partner. I think I've got that right. I'm sure you'll have seen the trend. I've kind of butchered it a little bit, but that is so cute because that is what I like to do with myself. I like to kind of think, wait a minute, if I'm being overly self-critical, and don't get me wrong, I am not perfect. There are times when we forget this, sometimes in the moment things can get a little heated, but when I'm really thinking about it, I do like to connect and think of younger me. You're talking to a child, you're talking to that inner part of you that's so vulnerable. They just want to be seen. They just want to feel safe. They just want compassion and praise. And then you can give them that. And I think that's a big part of like helping yourself to connect to yourself and overcome some of that maybe shame if you feel it that's making you show up feeling like you need to make everything perfect. Actually, you're just a little kid that just wants to be loved. So give your inner child, your little you, whatever you want to call it, give them some love and compassion because they are you. You might be grown, but there's still a little part of you there that still feels like that little child every now and again. Tell them that it's okay. Tell them that their artwork's great, that their idea's amazing, that yes, they should go for it, and give them that praise they deserve. Sometimes we just need a little bit of that self-love. And my last one is it leaves you with a sense of feeling trapped. This feeling, I feel like I'm just coming out of it quite honestly because I kept stop-starting. I'd have ideas, I'd start a bit, wasn't good enough, scrap it, back to the drawing board. And quite literally, I felt trapped for the longest time. And the feeling of not taking action, not showing up the way you want to show up, feeling like you're stuck in a cycle, it can just be so all-consuming. And I didn't actually realize how much of that feeling was tied to my own perfectionism. And in fact, honestly, like working through this, a lot of this has helped me overcome a lot of the problems I had and a lot of that feeling of feeling trapped. Because for quite a while, I was wondering why I couldn't get out of certain situations I was in. And I was wondering why I wasn't maybe moving forward, especially my work and things like that, and creatively in the way that I wanted to. And it was because I was holding myself to such ridiculously high standards. So breaking down some of those walls, being compassionate with ourselves, showing up, being a little bit messy, just being kind to ourselves and being like, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's fine. Done is better than perfect. People say that for a reason, and it's so true because actually, the more you fail and move on, the quicker you can make the next thing good. And so, yeah, you just need to free yourself, shelf can't even speak anymore, free yourself from the shackles of perfectionism. That's my list. I am going to quickly go for a few advantages. So these are the parts that I don't want to throw in the bin. That's my terminology for anything that I don't like. Throw it in the bin. But these are the parts that I thought, perfectionism does me some favors. I'll just whiz through these. Everything looks good to me and to others. Now, this is in my mind, my perfectionism, when I'm trying to make everything aesthetic and beautiful. I am an aesthetic girly, that's not going to go away. I do like things to look nice, but it doesn't permit all the disadvantages. Both can be true, but to different levels. It's like today, I am being simple. If you're watching, we've got the plant. Should we name her? Let's call her Martha. We've got Martha in the back here. That just popped into my head. I don't know why Martha. I've never named this. I've got loads of plants. I've never named any of them. But I put Martha here for a little bit of aesthetic. And it's okay. In the past, I'd be kind of going all out and trying to make it look like some masterpiece. But you can show up creatively, aesthetically in simple ways too. But anyway, that's a very personal one. The next one, aesthetic joy. The girl likes her aesthetics. For me, it's a red lipstick, wearing a red lipstick today. Simple things. It doesn't always have to be some high level thing anyway. Pride from doing a good job and others recognizing that. Now that is a big advantage for me. Of perfectionism, but a thing that I have been leaning into more is actually getting more pride and joy from just being consistent and showing up. Because before, I was definitely in that sort of child state of wanting praise, of wanting, oh, well done. Oh, you did some good artwork, or whatever it is. Whereas now I'm feeling a lot more pride and joy just from showing up, just from being creative, the process. Like this right now, right now I'm having a nice chat. I hope you're enjoying it too. But no, showing up creatively and being consistent, I'm getting so much joy off that. So I've kind of flipped that one a little bit, which feels good. And it's so funny looking at the advantages and the difference of the disadvantages. And one thing that my therapist said after we'd made this list, which really helped me actually, because you don't want to just throw all the good parts in the bin. We might want to be recovering perfectionists, but I can't believe this badge just actually stayed on. We might want to be recovering perfectionists, but that doesn't mean we want to just move forward and just put out things that are completely trash. There are levels to it. So my therapist kind of got me to put it into percentages, it's not actual maths, but I said that I think that perfectionism, on my list of perfectionism, there is 70% disadvantages and 30% advantages. And my therapist made a good point. You can kind of see it like a dial that you turn when appropriate. So sometimes, well, most of the time, clearly, that's what this whole episode is about. Most of the time, perfectionism is putting you at a disadvantage. But there are some times where there's little things like, for me, my advantages, which I've just shared, they might be very different for you. But sometimes we might want to kind of like move that dial and allow that to come through a little bit. I get so much joy out of creativity, but it's allowing that to show up without it being all consuming. So, you might have to play around and tune the dial a little bit, but it's allowing yourself to take that messy action while still holding on to the values that are important to you, but in a way that's just a little bit more healthier. So that's something that I found really helpful. I would 100% recommend doing a pros and cons list. I know, groundbreaking stuff. It's funny because we do some very deep work in our sessions, and I love how the pros and cons list is like one of the things, not the only thing, but one of the things that blew my mind. Like I've never done a pros and cons list before. Anyway, I've just read a note that I forgot to mention because I did make a couple of notes, but I clearly ignored those. And this was going back to the point that I made about it robbing you of your peace. And I literally just wrote the words, keeps you out of the present. That is a big one. I think you can't be present when you're being a perfectionist. And when you're present, you're allowing yourself to be more authentic and go with that creative flow. And obviously that's whatever it means for you in that moment. But like right now in this process, I am not being a perfectionist. My stomach just rumbled. I am not being a perfectionist. And it's allowing me to be really present, which stops me from being self-critical and all of these other things, insert list of perfectionism. Yeah, connecting to the present is a big one. And just some final thoughts. I think it's important to accept that you don't have control of every outcome. And I think a big part of, being a perfectionist or trying to make everything perfect is trying to have that control and make sure that everything is going to go right or well. But at the end of the day, whether you do something in a perfectionist way or you don't, you still can't control how you're perceived, how something turns out, what people think, what is going to happen. And I think accepting that you don't have control, as scary as it can also be like a huge relief, because we just want to make sure things are going to go right. We just want to make sure things are going to be good. And like I say, this isn't letting everything go. This isn't just being like, oh, nothing matters. It's just allowing ourselves to make mistakes and being okay with that, because we're human at the end of the day. And this is another thing, she's not done yet. This is another thing. Okay. I'm going to finish soon. I think we need to allow ourselves to change and grow. Like terms and conditions that you see on products and services, and it's like terms and conditions are subject to change. Your opinions are subject to change. Things happen in life that will change your opinions. They will change your ideas. They will change what matters to you and what you want to focus on. And that's okay. But trying to kind of combat that ahead of time and make everything perfect and foolproof, again, we've already gone over it, but it stops you from moving forward. You can't control everything. You can't preempt the future. You need to allow yourself to evolve, and you can only do that by showing up. So just accept that things are going to change. And you know what? Feel like that needs to be my disclaimer for myself, because sometimes I'm like, but what if I don't think this tomorrow? What if I learn something new? We're always going to learn something new. Well, hopefully you're always going to learn something new. You're always learning. You're always growing. And yeah, so your opinions are subject to change, and that's okay. We will learn and we will grow and we will overcome perfectionism. And highly recommend making yourself one of these badges, by the way. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for coming with me on this journey as I overcome perfectionism and allowing me to show up messily in this very off the cuff way. And hopefully I've helped you a little bit on that journey as well. If you got to the end and you're watching on YouTube, comment a yellow banana, because I am wearing my favorite vintage men's banana yellow blazer. So comment a yellow banana if you got to the end. That might confuse some people. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are listening on your podcast app, please leave me a 5-star rating and review if you enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this chat. I hope you did too. I will be back in your earbuds. That's sounding kind of gross. I will be back next week with more. So I will hope to see you then.